to Finance Committee, finally known as Finance Committee, and we do not have any public comment requests today. I think we'll have board members quickly introduce themselves so we know who's in attendance. I think Chair Hymas has to be excused for a couple of minutes this morning, but I'm Cindy Davis. I represent District 11.
Cole Kelly and District 12.
And Christina Bogus in District 8.
Randy Booth in District 13.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'll be chairing the meeting today, and Vice Chair Kelly is our vice chair here, and he'll help keep moving us along also. We have started each of our meetings by just having a little bit of an introduction by different people each time. And we have a couple of people from our staff this morning to tell us what they do here at USBE and something that we might not or wouldn't already know about them. So let's go ahead and hear first from Brian Ross.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Thank you. My name is Brian Ross. I'm the Assistant Finance Director of Budget. I work closely with Deborah, Assistant Superintendent of Operations, the budget side, budget formulation. We helping Deborah load and maintain agency budgets. I help oversee the chart of accounts, which is also known as the crosswalk. So we usually make that, and also help control access to FiNet. One of the things that the unique details, I guess, about myself is that I've worked for the state for 25 and a half years. Previous to working here for the last 7 years, I worked for state finance for 2 years, and then for the Utah State Courts for 16 and a half years. So that's just a little bit about me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning.
Wow. Thanks for all of your service in those many ways to our state.
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's hear from Sarah Harward. Sarah, are you online?
I'm here. Yes. You can hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. My name is Sarah Harward. I am your grants compliance officer, which means I work with our grant managers for federal and state compliance issues. I do trainings on our uniform grant guidance for our USBE staff as well as our LEA staff. I also work with our Utah Grants Management team on setting up grants in the system, troubleshooting, and also a lot of the development that Rebecca Nilsson is presenting on. And then fun fact, right? Fun fact, I'm a twin and my husband is also a twin. We both have twin sisters. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh my word. Are there twin?
I'm a twin.
Remember, Bias is a twin. This is a lot of twins here today. And my first and only grandbabies are twins, identical twin girls.
So
nice to meet you. And I remember you helped give a lot of the in-depth reports on how the COVID funds, money's coming in and out and how they were being used and such all through those years. That you were fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a point of personal privilege.
All right. We got Vice Chair Kelly speaking up.
Yesterday at about 4 o'clock, I got a cool email from my son. He's got a mission call. And my wife always says I have no chill, and she's pretty accurate about that. And I'm dying to have him open it. And he's on his way down to Vegas to play baseball. And he said, I'll wait till Monday to open it. It's killing me. So I seem a little anxious today. I'm ready for that thing to be open and find out where he's going, but I have to wait till Monday. So no chill.
Well, I'm glad that you gave us a heads up. So we'll know if you're shaking over there. You're shaking in anticipation. That's exciting. I cannot make it up in here, but all right. Well, let's go ahead and no, it's I just it's my favorite. Let's go ahead and start with 1.2, which is an action item, and it's our at-risk add-on funding report, which is new legislatively, and we have Director Rasmussen here to fill us in.
Thank you, Chair. Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. Good to be with you this morning. This is a new rule that is stems from a little piece of code that requires the board to monitor the use of the at-risk add-on funding. There's also some reporting requirements in there, and staff identified a need to have a rule to provide the specifics of how the board would get some of this information that's required. And so that's why we're bringing this rule for your consideration today. Essentially, this rule is designed to it specifies the deadline for submitting the funding report, identifies that financial data will be submitted through UPEFs, and then identifies some additional data that the board will need to fulfill the monitoring requirements in the statute that will be gathered as identified by staff, probably through Qualtrics, I think is what we discussed, but the lines 29 and 30 kind of give staff the flexibility to figure out how to gather that additional data. But if you have questions about that, we're happy to answer them. Director Uri can speak to the financial piece. I'm hoping Tanya Albornoz and Sarah Young are online to speak to the other data that's identified.
I have a question, and I promise it's not facetious. Is that okay?
You can ask a
Do we
facetious
actually
question.
need a rule to do this? Or can our finance staff just say, this is how we do it, and this is our expectation? Does the board need to go to a place of formalizing this and then coming back when it has hiccups? Or are we making this more complex than it needs to be? I'm genuinely wondering. Go ahead.
I mean, I think the first thing was, well, there were some audits involved in this from their Scott, or there's some risk involved that this wasn't being met. And so part of this is to respond to that risk and the feeling that we need to have more specifics for the LEAs to follow. Director Uri, you were gonna.
That's correct. St. Mary's School Finance Director. It's when the at-risk add-on, so previously we had what was called EARS, the enhancement for at-risk students. When the at-risk add-on was put into place, this piece of code was put into place. So it's not new, but the fiscal year 2023 MSP audit, minimum school program audit, they looked at this piece of code and said, how is the board collecting this outcome data from the LEAs that's reporting on intervention effectiveness? And we said, well, we're not. We are collecting through our UPEF system financial data on expenditure categories and things like that, but there is not a reporting mechanism for us to collect that data. I think the reason for a rule is to, I believe, kind of standardize how we collect that data, what it looks like. Without this rule, it's incumbent on the LEAs to report, but there's no standardization of how that would look like. And I think to make this a usable report for the legislature, which is what is in code, the intent is to have a usable, a format of data that the legislature could look at and see how this is benefiting at-risk students. I think that's the reason for the rule. So,
Thank you.
Is that?
Yeah, I just want to make certain we're not just making rules to make rules, and if you guys can do your job without us getting extra stuff on the board agenda, I would love us to be able to do that at some point. But I understand your answer. Thank you, sir.
Do we have any other questions about what's required? What's the timeline going to be for us to collect that, what's required, and what's the time commitment going to be for LEAs to provide?
I can try to speak to that. We do believe each LEA is required to have a definition of their at-risk, what at-risk means to them. Each LEA, is budgeting how they're going to use those at-risk funds. So we don't believe that it's requiring a lot of, practice outside what LEAs are already doing. It will take some administrative time for them to gather that data in the standardized format that we determine through the Qualtrics survey or other means, and report on that intervention effectiveness. But we do believe generally that LEAs should be able to already be doing that. So it's hard to quantify an exact number by LEA. You have an LEA here that maybe could
Could you weigh in?
weigh in,
Would you be
but
willing to weigh in? Were you finished, Sam? or-
yeah,
or
no, that was.
Dr. Yuri? We have a business administrator representative, Tom Hopper here. Can you weigh in on that for us?
Sure. So my name's Todd Hopper. I'm the business administrator for Franklin School District. Thanks for the opportunity to respond here. So Sam's correct in the idea that internally we already have these conversations with regards to how the at-risk monies are distributed, and they'll be distributed across several programs because we have defined at-risk uniquely to the granted needs and the experience that we have with our students. So we appreciate that flexibility that's provided in statute. And we have our responsibility to our own board to say, how are we using the funds and what outcomes we're experiencing. To then relay that to the state board shouldn't be terrible. It's definitely a separate reporting. And the question just becomes, what will that format look like? Will you prescribe to us what that is? Do we get to just share with you what we're already sharing with our own boards? And that's where the time and effort will come in, is do we have to create a separate report for a separate oversight body or can we use forward?
Do we know that yet?
So we've tried to outline essentially what the elements are in the rule. Cami, if you can show them lines 33 through 36, that would be the elements that we're asking for. We asked them to basically share with us what their definition of at-risk is, and then some data points that show the effectiveness, number of students served, and that would be the general elements that staff are asking for. It looks like we have a hand up, if I'm saying the screen right.
Trina, right?
Tanya Albernos.
Yes, Specialist Albernos. Go ahead.
Good morning, board. I'm Tanya Albernos, the coordinator for prevention. In answer to your question, Board Member Davis, on line 26, we have made the reports due on October 1st, and that's in alignment with all other prevention reporting requirements. So that's October 1st for the previous fiscal year. So that gives them some time to close out their year, provide us with the information. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I think the question will still remain then. It sounds like what the format's going to look like for the collection. Is it going to be a 20-page survey with specific questions that need to be answered? Or is it going to be, these 4 questions and you can kind of send in the information in your format that you're using for your current boards? If that's
Can we go back to the
question.
previous, what was it, 30?
Lines 31 on, Cami.
So on the report of intervention effectiveness related to the LEA's use of funds, okay, well, that could be one sentence, or that could be, it was effective. Or it, I think that we might want to have some more specific, or we don't want to make extra work. And that kind of an open-ended statement. But it's one thing to provide the data and the definitions, the number of students served, but then how effective was it? What do our officers here in the agency need in order to provide the legislature with what they're requiring in terms of part C there?
What defines effectiveness?
I wonder if 33 would do that, line 33, do you think? Because it's asking for data. the data would support if the effectiveness or not.
Since we're on through that question. Go ahead.
Okay.
I was gonna say, the tough thing is that each LEA is gonna have their own definition of what their at-risk population is, and so it needs to be somewhat general in that it's gonna vary from LEA to LEA, what information they're providing and what data they would probably have for their specific at-risk population.
Thank you. Vice Chair Kelly?
After the discussion of with our special ed specialist yesterday, is at risk the proper terminology that we're using now? We kind of talked about severe and changing the definition of severe to complex. Is at risk the proper term now?
This is specifically defined in code. This is kind of a whole different area. That was more in the licensing field than this is.
Because we just want to use lots of different words to define that. And then we want to throw in acronyms too.
What, I don't know.
I hear what you're saying. We're trying to we're making changes here at this level and for consistency, but I think this at risk is something that we haven't tampered with as a board, and I don't know if we want to, quite frankly, but I think it does fit here.
If I may, the definition in code is at risk means a public ed student who scores below proficient on a state board or LEA approved assessment or meets an approved LEA definition. So it's generally just students who are at risk of lower academic achievement for whatever reason the LEA determines.
Yeah.
That they're
Todd Hubbard.
And for us, at risk and special education populations aren't necessarily the same populations. So we do have a definition that works at risk for those students who are at risk of academic failure as opposed to those who are behind their progress in academics or special ed resources.
So how would you, if I may, Chair, how would you report the effectiveness of the intervention? How would you want to report it? How would it be most easy, most efficient? Or do we need to? I mean, I guess we need to. Is that required by?
What he's saying,
We would hope. Oh, sorry.
the similar way you report your local board in a similar fashion is kind of what I thought. Is that?
That's what we would prefer, is that we wouldn't have two separate standards. Sorry, Chair, if I can speak.
Yes, please.
Is we want to make sure that we understood that there could be a difference in expectations by our board has designated. So we use the majority of our funds for interventionists because that's where we're seeing the at-risk population demonstrate outcomes.
From the perspective of a board member, though, does that give us, do we now have from Granite School District one interpretation, from Alpine a different interpretation, from Wasatch a different interpretation of what that means? Yes, sir.
Which is allowable in code, which is how they wrote the code to give you flexibility.
And if I may speak again.
Yes.
So school district settings will be different enough. So you'll have your urban centers that have a different challenge with that risk as opposed to an rural experience with the challenges they have also with at-risk populations. And they may not have the same exact profile, but they're in the same situation of not being able to progress in their academics as we would hope and as they should.
Thank you. Let's go to Sarah online. Not Chief of Staff Young, Interim Assistant Superintendent of Student Supports. Young.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I just wanted to speak to the question about line 34 and the use of a report of intervention effectiveness related to the LEA of funds. That is a requirement out of Utah code. I also wanted to clarify that we, as staff, are trying to make this as simple as possible and also as open as possible to allow the individual LEAs to speak to their specific definition and their use cases, which is why you don't see it more detailed. So just to give that additional context for the committee's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, if you're ready to entertain a motion.
I would love it, Member Booth. Thank you.
I recommend that the committee approve R277632 at-risk add-on funding report draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor that the committee approves R277-632 at-risk add-on funding report draft 1 on the first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Members, please. Oh, I've done it this way. So, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Let's move to R277-317 Incentive for National Board Certification Amendment. We have Director Rasmussen and Program Specialist Erica Horsley.
Thank you, Chair. So I have one more rule for your consideration. This is the rule on national board certification and what's required to be submitted to process that. A few changes that we're making here that I'll just highlight. First, we're classifying this under the oversight category as exempt. This is the requirements of this rule primarily apply to staff, so we would call this exempt. The change that staff is requesting, you'll find on lines 36 through 40, and that's changing the deadlines for applicants to submit their applications for this. You'll see that they are asking to move those back a month to allow staff more time to process these in a timely manner. So you'll see that on line 37 and line 39. One other change we had was to remove some duplicative language on lines 51 through 54, which we think is not necessary. If you have questions about this, Erica Horsley, Specialist Horsley can answer those. I do have one amendment that I would like to have a motion when the time comes to make, just about striking some old language on lines 75 through 76. I have that on the motion document, but if you have any questions, we're happy to talk to you about those.
The old language is because of new code.
Well, there's a language that was put in on line 75 through 76 about the applied during the pandemic. It was specific to 2020, and we're now 5 years down the road, don't need it.
Then I would move that.
So,
Questions, members?
Well, I guess we have to move to adopt before we can move to amend.
you can do the amendment first.
Oh, yeah.
But then I would move to.
Tammy, can you show the Google Doc?
75 and 76, so we can get that over
Yeah,
with.
what line is that, Ben?
So the motion's on the screen if you want to read. It's the committee strike line 75 through 76.
And what it says is the superintendent shall establish an expedited process for educators seeking to begin the National Board Certification Program in 2020. So it's totally past and also moved on from 2020.
Yep. There's a motion on the floor that the committee strike line 75 to 76 from draft 1C. The superintendent shall establish an expedited process for educators seeking to begin the National Board Certification Program in 2020. Members, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Passes unanimously.
Chair.
Yes.
Oh, it looks like, I'm sorry, Ben got it. I didn't see who made the motion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate, is that Cami that's talking to us, I think?
Yes.
Thank you, Cami. And then now we're back up to the original motion. Members, do you have questions? I have one question if no one has a question beforehand.
I have questions, but I'm happy to wait in queue.
Okay, I just wanted to just double check my understanding from the finance EAC is that the ongoing money is still there for all the bonuses for the National Board Certified Teachers and such, but they didn't implement new funding, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes. So the new funding would be new teachers coming on board, or it would be increases for new teachers coming on board and current teachers?
It would be able to expand.
So any people who get National Board Certified now, will they still get the $1,000 a year bonus?
Yes.
But it was,
Actively in it.
so the new money was just to make that higher.
Correct.
Okay. Any other, oh, you have questions?
Couple questions.
Member Vargas.
Ben, if I could, or Director Rasmussen, if I could take us to line 90. It says, in order for an educator to receive a grant under this section, the superintendent shall require the educator to attest, etc. How are we tracking that? Because there are districts that offer a lot of money for this, sometimes up to $3,000 or $4,000. How are we tracking that they're not getting money someplace else?
I'd like to phone a friend. I think we have Coordinator Malia Height and Specialist Erica Horsley on the Zoom call who could probably answer that question.
I don't see either of you raising your hand. Dr. Height, would you like to address that question?
Sure, I'm happy to try it, and I'll let Erica jump in case I misspeak. Malia Height, Executive Coordinator of Educator Licensing. The national boards, they reimburse us, or we pay the national board, or we work with the national board to ensure that the national board isn't paying the educator and we aren't paying the educator. So when they apply, they attest that they're not seeking payments directly from the national board, and then we do the same.
Just the national? Sorry. Go ahead with your questions. I'll ask my question.
So it says here you have to be certified, fully certified to receive the grant under this section. So
Yes.
my question would be, like, for example, in the Salt Lake City School District, there's a salary adjustment that
Yes.
move over an entire lane if you're nationally board certified, and then there's a stipend that goes along with it. How are we tracking to make certain that those two things are not occurring at the same time?
That's a good question. I don't believe that there's anything that's preventing an LEA from adding any additional grants. So if an LEA chose as part of their employment compensation package, then that is something that is allowable. This part is specific to earning the national board certification and not being a nationally certified teacher.
So Director Height, can I direct you to the code? Because the code says national board certified teacher subsection B means a teacher who, and I'm quoting, holds a national board certification and has an assignment to teach in the LEA, which means to be eligible for this money, they would have to have completed the NBCT. Am I missing something?
Yeah, so there's one of the other pieces in this grant is that we will pay the fees for a teacher to become nationally board certified. So there's two pieces to this grant. One is we'll pay you to get through the process, and then once you have earned the certification and you have an assignment in an LEA, then we will continue to provide that grant.
Oh, that's where the expansion, that's where you can't expand, is that it's limited to a certain number of people and they can't expand based on the monies coming in. I'm not certain that's the way this rule reads, though. I'm not gonna belabor it. Can we go, which lines are the concern again?
Yeah, what are you looking at?
90 through 93.
Section 7.
Yeah. That would be one question, because as the code reads, in order to be eligible for this money, you actually have to have an NBCT.
That one's just the grant to get it in the first place, right?
No. Don't know where my hand is. This is Erica Horsley. If I may try and answer her question, program specialist.
Yes, please.
This part of the rule and statute indicates the funds that are used to help educators pay for the certification, as well as renewing the certification. And they have to submit evidence to us, that of what components they're going to be doing, or if they're going to be renewing the certification. And I review those applications, and then I set the funds forward to National Board to prepay the cost of renewing and earning the certification. This part is about earning the certification, the funds that we use that we give to National Board to help them pay for the cost. And then once they've earned or renewed the certification, then they may be eligible for the bonus, the $1,000 or $2,000 bonus for meeting the requirements for that. Does
So they
that-
have to show that they're not taking scholarship funds from anywhere else if they're gonna take these funds to attend.
Yeah. Yes, I have notations that if they say that they are receiving funds that are helping to pay for the fees of the National Board Certification, then I don't give them that additional fee. So if Salt Lake District helps them pay for, say, component 2, but then they apply to me to also get funds for component 2, I say, no, Salt Lake District's paying for that one. We'll pay for another component that they're not paying for. And so that's how that works out. If that makes any sense.
Well, any follow-ups?
No, I don't think that's how the code reads. We can all debate that later. I just don't. I appreciate you doing well, Erica. Thank you.
Just who does she need to connect with?
Um,
Would it be Erica or Malia to go over code?
I would say either, probably, maybe Erica first and
Does that work?
Yeah, that's fine.
so, Dr. Hyde and Specialist Horsley, remember Raga's may connect with you a little bit offline to look at just the code and looking at syncing that or how that syncs up. That's okay.
Well, yeah, I don't see anywhere in this code line linked in this document that says we can pay for this credential. I just don't see it. And so maybe.
Well, if it's not there, we can't. Unless the code says that we can't.
Well, the code says in order to have this money, you have to be a national board certified teacher.
Well, there are two, actually, so there are two things that you can get under this. So you have to be a nationally board certified teacher to get the salary,
Yes.
the bonus, but there's a separate grant to get the funding to earn the national board certification.
Can I speak for you? I think Member Vargas is asking if that is outlined in code anywhere. That separate disbursement that's for the scholarship piece, not just for the bonus piece. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it seems to me as this code is written, and unless there's a code line I'm not aware of, that we're doing stuff with this money that the legislature didn't intend. That doesn't mean I'm right. That's just, I'm not finding a code that says we can pay for this process.
We had anticipated questions on this at this point. We weren't addressing that particular section with our amendments. Perhaps if we could make these changes, we could bring the rule back. We could
Yeah.
follow up on this particular question with Member Vargas.
I think so, because I wonder if I know it was initiated thus, and most states do use money to give grants for them to get it and then a bonus after, but I don't know how we wrote it out, and so maybe we can research that a little bit more.
Chair, if I may, there is a separate code 53F-5 Part 2 that is the grant that pays for the certification reimbursement. And it's specifically section 202. And in that case, an eligible educator means an educator who is employed as an educator by an LEA and does not include the certification of a nationally board certified teacher.
Could you cite that code line again?
Yes,
202.
correct.
Any follow-up questions, Member Vargas?
No, I don't think so. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Should probably add this code line to the rule.
It's in there.
Thank you, Dr. Hyde.
I saw it.
Well, thank you, Ben. Clearly, I missed it.
If you look on 72,
It's not like we're trying to keep 1,000 things in our brains. Yesterday.
it's on 72. It's also listed. It's also listed on line 9 as part of the authority.
Does it link out correctly?
It does, I linked from it.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You didn't get my civic card yet. That's pretty.
Do you want mine on? I have 2 computers.
No, it's fine. Oh, I got this big screen today, so.
3 monitors.
I only have 2 today. 2 computers.
I'll entertain a motion if anyone has one.
I'll throw one out there.
Okay.
We're gonna we put the as amended in there, that the committee, I move that the committee approves R277-317 incentive for national board certification. Draft one is amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There is a motion that the committee approves R277-317 incentive for national board certification draft one on first reading as amended and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Seeing no other comments or questions, members, those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 1.4, which is an update on the LEA annual assurances document. And we have Compliance Officer Sarah Harward and Deputy Superintendent of Policy Elise Newey. And I'm thinking Specialist Harward is going to start us off.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. Sarah Harward, your grants compliance officer. So we bring the LEA annual assurances document to you annually for your awareness on and to be approved. Just a little bit of a timeline on these assurances. So assurances need to be certified by our LEAs by July 1st of each year. And we have to give our LEAs at least 30 days to review and complete those certifications. So we have to have them uploaded into the Utah grant system no later than June 1st. So we bring this to you in March so that just in case we need to make any updates, we have April, and then it needs to be approved no later than your May meeting. So just a heads up on the timeline for that. There were some major changes to this document last year, and during those discussions, you all talked about some additional changes that would be a good idea. So we've brought those forward to you today. So some of the changes that you're going to see is we have a new feature in Utah grants coming for this next fiscal year. It's called the Consolidated Pre-Application, and this feature is going to allow our LEAs to apply and budget for multiple federal awards in one place and kind of reduce some application burden for them. So those assurances that apply to those awards are IDEA, our Every Student Succeeds Act, and then just general grant compliance items. Those are going to be now found in that consolidated pre-application. So LEAs are going to certify to those assurances in that pre-application process when they're applying for those awards. The remaining federal assurances that don't apply to those individual programs are going to remain on this document, and that includes our adult education as well as our CTE assurances. So you'll see that still on our assurances. Our state assurances will still be found on this document for our LEAs to certify to. And then we have two new sections that we have added. The first being a section for legislative session. And what that section is for any new assurances that come out of the current legislative session. As to my knowledge, we haven't had any yet, so there is a possibility that this section could be blank. But if we just wanted to make sure that these get highlighted for our LEAs because they're brand new. So this will be a section for those items. The second new section is from our internal audit department. They annually go through the areas and they've noted the non-compliance that they've seen this year. And what we've called it is this high risk assurance items. And so those items of non-compliance that they saw frequently from last year, we're going to put them on the assurances document for this year to highlight that these might be a problem with your LEA last year. Maybe they weren't a problem with your LEA last year, but maybe they need to make sure that you're addressing them this year. So that's what this section is for. And so this, like I said, came from our internal audit department. And so this section will be updated annually as well for to keep up with what's going on currently with our LEAs from our internal audit department. That's pretty much it as far as our updates to the assurances. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, we have had many conversations over the years, on and off, about assurances documents. You know, some said, well, there's too many things on the assurances document, we need to take them off, but then some say, no, it's too much of the other kind of reporting, we need to put more on, and then some say, well, we weren't getting accurate information, like, for example, on school fees, so we took them off and then moved to auditing, and it's just a lot of conversations. But do you have questions about this? I have one question about this document. Other members, do you have questions about this? I do. Member Chair Hymas?
I wondered with the blank portion, the legislative portion, does this have to come back to us? I mean, do we approve, we see all of the assurances? And is this going to come back in like 2 months? Do we need to just pause on this?
Once the
What's the
session ends?
legislative?
Could you answer that? I see Deputy Superintendent Jones shaking his head, but
Go ahead, Sarah.
Sarah,
So if you pass it out of committee today, we'll take it to full board next month, and we will for sure have any items since session ends today. We'll for sure have any items. So if you're comfortable, you could pass it out of finance committee today, and then we would add those items for full board. If not, that's why we brought it to you this month. If you don't pass it today, we have time for it to come back next month, and then it can go to full board in the May meeting. So whatever is best for you.
thank you. And do I call you Officer Harward? That's a grant compliance officer. We will follow up from Chair Hymas, and then Deputy Jones has.
The rest of 40.
Yes.
Just so if there's time on this, which I appreciate, this is assurances for next year, then when do LEAs, when does this go to LEAs?
Yeah, thank you. So LEAs have to certify by July 1st, and we have to give them 30 days minimum to complete that. So we have to have it in Utah Grants ready to go by June 1st. So we have to have it approved by the May meeting because we won't quite make it with the June meeting.
Thank you.
So Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones, I was just going to expand on that piece of it. If the committee could pass it out, then we as staff will make sure that we update it. It's giving longer lead time for that July 1st mandatory submission, right? Then we can get it out before June 1st or just a way of allowing more lead time to the LEAs to do it. If that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. And Officer Harward, can you tell us how many total between the new system that we're doing and this system, how many total items do we need will we have an assurance for?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 38 on the current document, the current version, assurances between the state, federal, and the high risk audit. And then there's none from the legislative session right now. Usually we don't see more than 1 or 2. And I've only been in this role this is my second session. And so in the last 2 years, I've only seen 1 or 2 assurances come from session. So we're looking at maybe 39, 40 from the current document. And then from the assurances that got moved to the consolidated pre-application, let's see, we are looking at, sorry, 1 second. There are 44 assurances that were moved to the consolidated pre-application. Those include the IDEA, the ESSA, and then general grants compliance.
So there are 82 required assurances from our LEAs.
Yes.
And this is partial. This is not asking assurances for everything that's required. When our when OLAG did the audit, they found over 350 things, compliance, reporting, whatever we call it, that our LEAs have to do, right?
That's correct. There are still other assurances that are super specific to individual grant programs that we're not going to put on the general list because our LEAs really, if there's very specific, they just are going to assure to them if they accept the grant funding.
So I guess my point for the finance committee is just to say that the assurances document should be seen as a living, breathing document, right? It shouldn't be seen as something that, you know, things go on, they're there in perpetuity forever. We should be going, okay, we've had 9 years with this on the assurance document, and we've done audits or monitoring visits. If we haven't found any significant findings, those things perhaps could come off. Whereas vice versa, as we've got new things coming on, we might have seen some things that need to be added on, but hopefully.
So are there any things that could come off?
Well, I don't, that's my question. I don't know. And we'd have to look and see. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
I think we've done our due diligence to, at least at this point, to try this first iteration and to think, to Board Member Booth's question, Chair. Yes, there are things that can come off. However, we've already scrubbed for those things. We've already really tried to do a comprehensive review and find those. So we are trying to balance how much we ask for. Well, certainly, but I would just recommend that we give it a chance, right? And then see what responses we get. Now that may take more than a year, right? It might take, because then ultimately when you make an assurance and then you're subject to audits and things like that, things, it gets fleshed out that way that, well, maybe you were, doing or meeting that code that you assured us you were, those types of things. And then we find out what the cause of that is. What's the reason for that? Not as a gotcha or we're going to punish you, but because what it helps us do too is if we have 158 LEAs, right? If we see that there's 120 that are, for whatever reason, are not complying or after they make the assurance, we should look at that, and so this helps us do that too. It's all part of the same process equation, I guess.
And a handful of years ago, this was in standards and assessment, and they did a big scrub there and a really careful look at all of these requirements. And so we kind of feel like we're in a healthy place. Director Yuri.
A lot of the ones that remain, it says directly in statute, an LEA shall annually assure that they are doing this. And so it's directly from statute. Sarah's done an amazing job. Each of the assurances has a reference to the specific code piece or federal regulation. So, I absolutely support eliminating assurances when we can, but a lot of these are directly required by code. Even if everyone is complying, it still says in code, the LEA shall annually assure that they're doing this.
And I'll give a little just tidbit from the Reports and Requirements Task Force. Their ask over the last couple of years has been that legislatively also, we look at, is there a time when some of those could or should be sunsetted? We look on our end that if there are big reports required in code or in rule, and we go for a handful of years and we're good, is it possible to scale the big report back to an assurance? And then if we go for 4 years and we're finding that we are compliant overall, is it possible to remove that off of insurances? But that's a process and a conversation that we are in the middle of having with OLAG and legislative drafters and some others, looking at regulatory burden and other things. Any other questions or comments about this? I have a question. Okay, if I could draw your attention to number 8.
I'm not certain that reads the way the code line is set up. It says medical recommendations by the school personnel to parents. And if you go to that code line, it's actually the prohibition of that, except in certain circumstances, and with the exception clause is suicidal ideations. And so I'm not certain that reads the way it should be. It should be the prohibition of medical recommendations, because the code says that you can make observations, that you can, it says a school personnel may provide information and observations about that student, including concerns in the following areas: progress, health and wellness, social interaction, behaviors, communication, and observations. Nowhere in here does it ever give school personnel the authority to make a medical referral or recommendation. And so I'm wondering just about the language itself. It's a long code. We could all read it. I can message it out if you want. But I'm just wondering about that language. It seems to read. What's the title of the code? Can we just match? The title of the code is, believe it or not, medical recommendations and exceptions. But nowhere in this code does it allow for medical recommendations to be made.
But I think, because I have to do this, so and in my policy, it's clear that we do not make recommendations. So I get the title is different than is kind of the opposite of what you're saying, but LEAs are familiar with this. We know that we can't play doctor, right, and say, hey, I recommend your kid. So, you know, if we want to change the title of the code and then change the title of this, but since it's in reference to code, I don't think there's any confusion. I don't know if staff has heard any confusion from the.
Well, what I will say is below the title where it says policy has been adopted and implemented as required. That's what Member Hymas is, or Chair Hymas is speaking to. I mean, we can certainly update the title if that clarifies things for anyone, but I think that's just saying that's the subject that we're addressing, and we're addressing it by having a policy that says we don't make medical recommendations.
Okay.
So
and I get the point, it just does not read like that.
Oh, I hear what you're saying.
Maybe we could make sure they can change the name of it in code, so we're matching the.
I don't know if that's worth any.
No, maybe not. This juice might not be worth this piece.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape there. I appreciate it being brought up because for people just reading it, I agree. Even as a beginning administrator, I was like, we can't do that, can we? It's like, no, you cannot. So
Rightfully said, a policy has been adopted and implemented regarding prohibitions and exceptions as required. In the description. Is that something?
I guess that adds a little bit of clarity, but
I think it does.
Would you, I mean,
adds
if
clarity
anyone
for
wants to
sure.
make a motion, that says something can be.
You should make that motion.
Are you making it?
Yes, but I'm not sure I can repeat what you just said.
Vice Chair Kelly? Vice?
Repeat what you said.
Oh, I just said maybe just add the words. A policy has been adopted and implemented regarding prohibitions and exceptions as required.
Prohibitions and exceptions as required.
Just adding the words prohibitions and
So,
exceptions.
yeah, I'll make the motion to add prohibitions and
Exceptions.
exceptions as required.
There's a motion on the floor to add the words prohibitions and exceptions
To
into
section 8, what do we call it?
section 8 description. Any discussion to that motion? Members, please vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
That passes with Member Hymas opposed.
We ready for the main motion?
I think so. I had one more question. On the, I mean, this is for CAE Davis. On the at-risk, the new high-risk section, it looks, I only just started reading, glanced at it, it looked really subjective. So how, is there an objective piece to it?
Could you tell me where you're looking against City?
I just noticed it on the screen, was the new high risk. It seemed like it was asking for an assurance of sort of mannerisms, communications, comply with all the laws. I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So as mentioned, these are high risk assurances. So potentially coming from non-compliance that was identified, also coming from risks that are identified on the hotline, risks that are identified on completed audits, of which we have many, and in process audits, which we have many. And so went through, identified where in code, Utah code or board rule, the criteria that is being challenged with allegations or non-compliance. And so those are the things that I pulled over. Now, where it gets tricky is this is LEA assurances. And if you notice on the first one where it's 217, right? And it's like, hey, those are educator conduct standards. We're actually seeing it's one of our #1 areas on the hotline of concerns. Well, can an LEA assure to educator conduct? But no, but that's why we put it at the top. It's like, hey, just make sure everyone's aware of this. And so the assurance is just like, your educators are aware of this, right? Because we're having problems in that area. Should it be here? Right? This is one way to address a risk. Does it have to be here? No. Could it be done somewhere else? Yes. So that, I mean, that's just open to policy if you wanted to.
Training, should the, I mean, I don't, like on #1, comply with all federal, state, and local laws in this regard, I'm assuming, in this area. But like, is it requiring a do they assure they held a training, or like, how do you address?
Sorry, may I?
Yes, go ahead.
So it says the LEA assures it has addressed, which could be, we sent an email.
That's good. I missed that word.
It could be that they've trained, it could be that they've said, hey, here are all the state laws and here are possible trainings if you're unaware.
Yeah.
But you can't pretend you're not aware. It could be that they just have to address it.
That's perfect. That answers my question. I was just reading the stuff, the list, and I wasn't looking at the bold on top.
Well, honey, I missed an entire code line earlier, so.
It takes a village, I guess. Perfect. All right. That answers my question. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. That's helpful. And thank you.
Member Booth, I think you're up.
Well, I would like to move that the committee recommends the board approves the LEA annual assurances document.
There's a motion on the floor that the committee recommends that the board approves the LEA annual assurances document. Seeing no further hands, members, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. I'm just gonna note that we had a in here.
Oh, should have been asked for them to done.
So we might need to do that a little differently, right? We might need to do that again, Member Booth, and add in the words as amended. Could you do that?
Well, then, I will be happy to move that the committee recommends that the board approves the LEA annual assurances document as amended.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee recommends the board approves the LEA annual assurances document as amended. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. So we are to our information and recognition of progress, achievements, or improvements. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Thank you, ma'am. So this month, we're going to do the deeper dive on the USIMS infrastructure. So if we could recognize Katrina Brinkley for that presentation. And then we'll talk about the future iterations of how we provide you updates and information. That's led by Chair Davis. So if we can recognize Katrina.
Yes. And Director Brinkley.
Thank you. Katrina Brinkley, Chief Product Owner and Program Manager.
You guys were all looking away from me.
I was sorry. I did too. I was like, I think she's online. No, she's right there.
Excellent. So we're going to go pretty quickly. We do have myself and Tim Davis, our educator product owner. Mark Waddus is online, as well as Don Moody. So it's kind of nice not having to ask you if you can see my screen because it's right there. So just an overall reminder, USIMS initiative, we're trying to re-engineer the core data collections and reporting capabilities in accordance with 53E-3-518. We also work for the student backpack, which is 53E-3-515, I'm pretty sure. And we have divided USIMS into 3 major domains, the educator, the finance, and the student domain. And I will give each of my product owners some time to do some updates on what's going on with those domains.
Sorry.
You're fine. And just as a reminder, the roadmap does change on a pretty consistent basis. So if you ever have questions on what is in the roadmap, there is a link here that you can click on. It is publicly accessible. You can go view it, see what's going on the roadmap. We've also got a section on that same link that actually shows what's coming up after this fiscal year. So you can go see what's coming up after we complete this current year. Financials, you can see here, we have spent over the term of the project $21.6 million. We have total 38 million funded, and we are currently working with the 20 USIMS bucket of money. Are there any questions on financials?
Chair, can we hover on this just for a second for me to add some additional information?
Yes.
During the session, questions came up related to several bills about USIMS, what it was intended to do, what it doesn't do, especially in relation to Representative McPherson's bill. And questions came up, and there was some misinformation about how much we have spent and how much we're budgeted for. The key takeaway is just doing a little bit more granular level detail than what Katrina is expressed, is USIMS has been going on for several years, that's true. If you take 7 years and put it into 21 million roughly, right, that's about 3 million a year, which is actually less than a lot of other states spend on their IT infrastructures, on updating equipment or hard servers, those types of things too. We can show that. We can prove that. The other key takeaway, as you may enter into dialogue with your colleagues up on the Hill or other board members, is to date, most of the 21 million was paid for from ESSER, from COVID funds, basically. And it was done allowably. We've had several reviews and it's not been selected for further detail, which is a good indication that they agree that the money that we used for ESSER to improve our infrastructure for reporting purposes was allowable and well invested. That's the key thing I would say about the financials, especially when we have new committee members, is that you are likely as board members at one point in time, since this is an ongoing project, since we're always seeking to do what right is with our systems, balancing state roles and responsibilities with cybersecurity, with all of those other moving pieces and parts, is I would just ask that because it was expressed by a legislator that we'd spent over 40 million on this, and that's just not true. We're around half of that, of which most of it is or was from ESSER. So we've only spent roughly 4 million of state funds over 7 years. 7 years, right? That's not and the state money that we've used was never new money. We never got appropriated an additional amount of money. It's all been carried forward. It was all carried forward. It was provided to us before. So I just wanted to make sure.
There were 17 originally.
Correct.
So it's been carried
And
forward to
COVID,
17.
yes, ma'am.
And then
Yeah,
we
'cause
took
non-mask.
COVID to help. Originally, years ago, we asked for tons more than that to get systems that really work like fine. What is it? Is that saying? Like a fine, whatever, well-oiled machine or fine-tune something, but we didn't get that. We asked for that, but we never got it. So when there are frustrations or complaints about data or finances or such, we have to go back several years and say, well, we gave you the Cadillac version that would do all the things that we wanted and we were denied.
Right.
So then the next sort of step was USIMS, and that's what we're working on now.
Yes.
And so this is the money that you're talking about.
Correct. The other piece too, I think a key takeaway for this, especially for members new to the board, new to the committee, is you to Chair Davis's point. It was a compromise to the, hey, let LEs select their own systems, let them stay in their own systems. Don't try to put everybody into one financial system. Don't try to put everybody in one SIS system. This was a compromise, so we provide infrastructure to move data from disparate systems across things, including our own Aspire. We have Aspire SIS in our house, right? That was the other piece too. Also, key thing that I realized or recognized in the legislative session, and especially since we have a lot of new legislators as well, nobody's fault or anything like that. This was actually started by an external study that the legislature ordered the board to do several years ago. So we partnered with the Division of Technology Services, DTS, right? And it was DTS's recommendations to build the infrastructure, not hire. That was a board staff, it wasn't the board. The board just took the recommendation from DTS and then coupled with that whole consideration about, LEA choice in systems and all that, this was and I'll call it a compromise, we're not compromised though in the infrastructure. Our staff, the contractors have done a really good job of it. And I really think you can see that we've done it pretty efficiently, given, I think, no one anticipated COVID. So, when COVID came and that money was available for improving system infrastructures because of we knew at the end of COVID, which now here we are at the end of COVID, and we're on the, not only for how we spent the money or where the money went for, but what outcomes, those types of things. We're able to do that a lot more than we would have been. And you'll see some of the, before USIMS and after coming up in the schedule, we wouldn't have been able to do as well as we've done reporting use of COVID funding too. So it was a double benefit to us to be able to use the COVID funds. And now we're one of the, if not the leading states, getting a lot of accolades and a lot of kudos for our precision and accuracy and reliability in how we tracked our funding, where it went, those types of things too, all things considered. So.
Can I ask this, unless another member has a question right now, to put this into layman's terms? And I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's taken me a long time to wrap my head around a lot of this, and I still come up with questions. But where we were, and that big Cadillac request for a big system was prior to my even being on the board. I mean, that was long, 80, how much?
80 to 100 million.
80 to 100 million was the original ask for the Cadillac data, finance, everything, all encompassing system. We went from that to 17 million for a USIMS system. So, and that all the local LEAs could use their systems to talk to us. And then during COVID, one of the only things they funded that we begged for was 4 million, and Representative Ballard gave that to us to help our local LEAs, particularly our charter schools and our small LEAs, to get their finance systems to a point where it would be able to work with USIMS, correct? So there is that extra piece from the 17 million that was out there. If I'm understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong. We're at a place now with our finance systems that's really, really good. We've got our local LEA systems that are talking to USIMS, and we've got, I think there's 7, are they 7 systems that folks are using?
Yes.
For financial. For financial, and in code requires that LEAs use systems that will help them be compliant. So that feels to me like the place we're starting now with the SIS systems, in my opinion. Am I right in thinking that way, or am I off in understanding that? Because now we've seen what can happen financially with these systems, and now we're back here having these conversations of where we go ahead for student information systems, and how do we get to this good place with our student information systems so we can have reliable and accurate data.
And how do we maintain? I'm sorry.
I think it's Dawn needs to be muted.
Who is?
I think it's Dawn needs to be.
Oh,
muted.
does someone online want to make a comment? Member Booth.
My mind just went blank. I can't remember what I was saying. It'll come back to me.
Okay. Well, either I'm slow probably I'm slow, but it has taken me a long time just to get to that point where I can, in layman's terms, understand this systematically over the history of this.
So here we are in a good place now. We've arrived at this
With finances,
with finance.
but not with
But
SIS.
how do we, as we project to the future, as we continue through the rest of this year, as we take on a whole bunch more, who knows what happens in the federal scene, how do we, I mean, we probably can't do the miracle that we've done on over 7 years. How much did you say?
21 million total, most of which is ESSER money, 17 million and 20.
And money, carry forward money was only
For state money.
State money.
No new money.
And this has been the big debate, because there's been the one SIS, we could put, 38 million into building one SIS, one system for everybody to use across the board. Our LEAs have said, we don't really change everything our parents and teachers, administrators and everything does. Can we use our own systems, like the finance situation, and talk with USIMS? That's kind of been where the board has gone, and where it sounds like legislators supported last year, but now I'm hearing word that maybe some legislators are going back to this other ideas of, this is where we're at, right? This is the big overarching conversation that we're engaged in.
And there probably won't be new money on the horizon.
No, we don't.
To
We
deal
asked for
with whether or not they want us to go to one fits all system and require LEAs to make changes, which we've not made them make in the future.
So they are gonna have to make changes on their own systems, but we're asking for money for that too, and we didn't get that either. So, do you want to address that?
Well, so actually, I thought that the EAC had done 10 million, right, for the, yeah, 10. So.
From a 35
But that,
request.
that 10 million would not be for USIMS, it would be for LEA systems. And we try to get away from the term, they're still using student information system, right? It should be student information systems, LEA student information systems, right, to help, because there's still people that are reading that going, oh, that Scott's still trying to get everybody in one system, dang it, so no. It will be used in that manner. The intent is certainly there of how the language is. So you see that too. If I may, Chair, I just want to clarify things, which I think we'll also get, we'll get moving here again on the presentation. As far as capability, USIMS has demonstrated the capability that we have to interoperate with systems. And I want to just make sure that none of us would ever say that it's not from lack of trying, but there's still disparities or shortfalls in not just USIMS, but the LEA systems as well. And it's not their fault. It's not we are trying to, as you'll see later Dawn is going to present the financial system module about how we're connecting, doing those types of things. So as far as the law goes, I felt strongly that we've demonstrated the capability. We are still, though, having to test and connect and do all this across all different systems, right? And that's, this is where Katrina and I get into it quite a bit, where I'm hurry, you're not going fast enough, hurry. And then she's like, well, we've got to, because the volume of trying to coordinate and exercise that capability, right, is when you deal with so many different systems, then it's taking more time than I thought. It's taking more time than I thought. Doesn't mean we're not going to get to what right is or get to the compliance. Right now, you'll see we're demonstrating that we can. It's just going to take a lot more work and a lot more time and a lot more energy from all of us to do that.
So how many different systems throughout the state are being used?
7 financial systems, and then I think 9.
Mark, is it 9 SISs or is it 10?
Because there's a couple of
It's 8.
8. Does that include the homegrown ones?
Are you finding there's one or two that's harder to work with than others?
We actually, most of the SIS vendors have been lovely to work with. We did have troubles contacting one of the SIS vendors, but we actually spoke in an LEA data meeting that they have on a monthly basis with Darren and his team, and said, hey, if anybody has a contact for this SIS, please reach out. And I think there was 5 different ones who sent their vendor like, hey, they can't reach you, come contact us. And he emailed us and called us that day and was like, what's going on? So we've since been able to contact and talk with every LEA's SIS.
The reason for the question, rather than saying, you have to use this one, can you limit it to 5 and say, these are the 5 we're finding
Exactly.
work best, and work within those 5. If it's currently 7 and we think 7 are working, let's stay within those 7 so that we're not.
Because that very thing is required in code.
That's kind of what we're
ish
doing.
For finance. what
Yeah,
you're saying.
it's kind of what we're doing by
Not
saying
SES.
USIMS requires systems who are usable with the EdFi data standard. So we've chosen this data standard that won't be the only data standard forever. We'll probably get more, but we've said we're going forward with the EdFi data standard to begin with. So any system that you choose needs to be compatible with that system. And with every SIS vendor that we've met, a large number of them are already EdFi certified, so that's not a problem. And those who are not EdFi certified are interested in at least working with us to understand how to get this EdFi certification, or at least get an EdFi API up with
But
us.
we need to improve Aspire to get EdFi certified. Are we even EdFi certified with Aspire? Because
We are not.
We've got to do a lot of improvements.
Because we set off Aspire, and I'm not being critical.
I know,
You know,
yeah.
through you, ma'am. I'm not being critical, but the decision was not to develop or expand Aspire, was basically. keep
And this
it
was
as a
years
basic
ago.
one. This was years ago, and you as the board just recently turned that back on.
That's right.
About 2 years ago, well, year and a half.
So a portion of that $10 million is going to be need to use to improve Aspire as well.
Well, I would actually say that if it all goes through and we get funded, at some point, the board needs to really decide the future of Aspire. Do you want to continue providing that, or I know we don't want to do that here, and this is just an information.
And 90 LEAs are using it currently, so we just need to keep.
Yeah, it's closer to 100.
100 LEAs are currently using Aspire.
Right. Small, almost close to 100 LEAs, but only for 12% of the student population.
Right, very small.
So see, that's another thing that people,
small districts.
who are
Charters.
mostly charter schools, mostly charter schools, but yeah.
But is it just because they don't want to put the money into a better system?
So that question is, if I may, Chair, that question has come up a lot. This is the answer I give to it. It's not because I don't think they want to avoid putting money into it. I just think just like we all do, just like Todd does with Granite, they have to make decisions at their level on what to invest in. They're on a limited budget, right? Yeah, so I don't think,
That's what one.
I'm not saying that the chair is asking that, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he's saying that's thing. I just look at what he just asked as an opportunity to say, and this is why that 10 million could make a difference to us, right? It's the economies of scale of, I think everybody agrees I'm a systems person, right? That's not my only thing, because I think systems should support humans, not vice versa, right? So if we can get to our concept, some of that too. So yes.
That, yeah.
It did. Or Aaron, sorry, you find her.
Data statistics. Anyway.
Director Bradford made any errors.
The title of the Director of Data and Statistics.
Okay.
So just sharing too is, why do you choose certain systems? It is a budgetary decision. It is also a support system. For example, charter schools use, the different management systems, and they have supports, and people say, hey, which one's so there's lots of variables that go into those decisions, just kind of sharing. And make sure that the board is also aware there are user groups, a lot of user groups behind these systems as well. And so, there's a lot of different pockets of expertise around. So just kind of sharing is, you do have, the Aspire system, you got the individuals who are using it. It is a decision, it's a budgetary decision that they have to make, but it's also like,
hey, I'm working with a certain management system who knows this very, very well, and they leverage that. It's cost effective to do it that way. So just kind of sharing it is there's multiples, you know, as we go out, we do the training, we have our monthly data meetings and such, you know, these discussions definitely come up. We go out, we share our own trainings. We just went to South St. Pete this week. They'll talk about their systems and the submission there on Power School. Just sharing, you know, there's lots of stuff going on. So yes, it is budgetary decisions, but there's also who do they lean on at the moment and those supports they have too as well. And anyway,
I recognize this is a loaded question, but is Aspire doing what you need Aspire to do?
Not quite yet, sir, through the chair. No.
Yeah, like all the LEA's systems, it will need improvements too.
And it's, if I may, just real quick, for example, with the Utah Fits All Scholarship, we didn't direct the LAs to do this, but we said, you know, you have to separate these students in your systems, right? And so we tried to do that too with Aspire. I think we've accomplished that. I think we set up the 900 series in there, Sam, Deborah, right? Yes, okay. So what it's oftentimes becomes, my point is, it oftentimes becomes a race. Laws come out, and then we are trying just desperately to get to, which was also an argument for a one system approach, was then you're only having to update or upgrade one system for everyone to adapt to the changes in law or rule and do this. So, okay, but no, we're not there.
Did you have a problem? Well, I'm just wondering, we have 90 LEAs using Aspire.
98.
Would it be more cost effective to invest in like a Power School or Infinite Campus and then subcontract that out? Is that allowable under the user agreements? If we do something like that?
Chair, if I may, so it's possible to do something like that, if I understand the question correctly. However, that right now, all of the SISs are on local contracts, right? We could do a statewide contract or something along that lines to facilitate choice of systems. We took a similar approach with financial systems, where we went out and had vendors reply to a statewide solicitation, so that we didn't mandate that an LEA had to choose any of those that are on a statewide contract, but it just allows for that. I think that's what more than robotics is getting at, Chair.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, can you just clarify with us for the finance pieces? What in code, something was done to allow us to say, here are these example systems that are viable.
Right.
Can we, or do we need something like that for our local SIS systems?
We can. I'm not, Chair, I'm not going to go as far as saying we have to, or I think it would certainly help, especially if we get 10 million, right? Because then we can, you know, put out a solicitation, things, and then, you know, do something along that line, say, here's, and going back to the question of, are there particular, I think it was Board Member Kelly asked, are there particular systems, you know, maybe 5 of them or something like that? We could certainly look to do that, and they can help choose for that too. The one thing I would say though too, and I think Mr. Hauber would be able to speak to this, it's really difficult and a hard challenge to get, or when LEAs choose to switch systems, right? You just open yourself up to all sorts of vulnerabilities. It takes a long time. We have to run the system in parallel to their old system for reporting purposes, those things like that. My point is I would want to, or I would recommend that we follow the same line, saying, hey, you don't have to choose these 5. Whatever you choose is up to you. Yes, it has to meet the law for compatibility and interoperability with USAMs, right? But here's some other choices, right?
And if yours isn't, you're going to have to move to one of these trusts. That's how we're doing it with finance, right? The finance systems.
Yes.
And can I?
And so far though, we haven't had to have anybody do that. I was very concerned about one particular system, and so far it looks like they have adapted it.
We had a third party be hired by one of the LEA systems to build a specific API for QuickBooks so that they were able to connect that, and they're using that for multiple charter schools to be able to connect. So as long as they can connect in the way that we need them to connect, we're not policing that. We're just making sure that we're getting the information correctly. And that's what we care about, is that the data comes in correctly so we can do what we need to do with it.
Okay, and I'm gonna go to Deborah Jacobson, who I think had something to say about a potential code or mirror with the SIS, like we have with finance, maybe in code. And then also to Todd Hobart for a comment about that.
So I think what you're looking for is economy of scale, right? So that we can do a cooperative contract across the LEAs can actually procure from. And we already have that legal authority under our procurement code. We can do cooperative contracts on behalf of the LEAs and they can use them or not use them. It's their choice. So
you don't need to seek legislation necessarily, although it was nice to have it in the other realm to kind of get this
We're
going.
not doing that now.
Not for SIS.
But we are for
We are for the
finance.
I think there's one or two vendors that came through, like CGI and somebody else.
three or
Was
even.
it three?
I
Okay.
think it's three.
We did have some issues with vendors being responsive.
Yeah.
One of the issues that we run into is LEAs like to customize. And when you do a cooperative contract as USBE, you set those parameters for kind of a standardized system. And so an LEA that wants an additional, and we could, possibly work into the contract, additional modules at certain pricing. But there are things too that, LEAs customize further as well. So we did have some vendors on the finance side that just kind of became non-responsive. They didn't really want to go to the length of setting up a cooperative contract. So those are some of the issues that come up.
There are pros and cons.
Thank you. Let's go to business administrator, representative, US Biorepresentative, President Howard.
Thank you. I'll probably go along the same lines as what Sam just described. Granted, just recently, what's recently 2 years now, went through a change in SIS systems because the systems that we wanted to have in place were not available with the vendor. So we personally changed. One of that had to do with performance-based grading. The system we had didn't do that, so we needed to find one. In fact, no one really could do it, so we're working with a vendor that was willing to work with us to develop that. And so it's that customization thing is if we want to go somewhere with products, we have the volition and ability to do that. If we're in a state system, how does that work? And it's not clear, it's not a complaint, it's just we don't know how it works. And so in that void of not knowing, we tell ourselves stories. And so I think that's probably the largest impact. The next will be fiscal, as Deputy Jones has described. What does it cost? Will economy of scale actually come into play? Will it not? And there is also, as Deputy Jones described, there is a huge change from one system to another. You're educating almost every employee in the district. You're touching every teacher, every principal, every specialist, everybody. It's not a few people who are just doing some data entry. You've got everybody, so you have to get them all on board with what's happening and how to use the system. And unfortunately, we're in a high-risk environment right now. A lot changed, and we have certain dates we have to get our data into the USBE and accurate. After that date, if we find an error, bummer deal. And granted, went through that this last year. We were switching systems. There was something we weren't aware of in the system. I've got a $2.5 million problem because of a data error that I didn't know about. Now, I'm not whining. It's just, this is the high risk environment. Now I can't go back and say, hey, had a problem. There's enough money appropriated, but since this law says I can't talk to you anymore, I can't even access the money. And it just now rolls back to the state, which is kind of frustrating. And so I describe that again as a high risk environment. You got to get it right. And if we're going to move people over or move them around, it's not just hard to do, it's risky to do now.
And if I may interject.
Yes, please.
USIMS is attempting to replace 28 systems at the Utah State Board of Education rather than just one SIS to one SAS. So if you're talking about complexity and the changes of that, think about how we're engaging, just to get us back on the rails a little bit about my presentation.
Well, if I may, Chair, that's why it's so important that, that not only taking the time today, is because we don't do this every month. I won't stop and to see. The other piece to this is what we find that a lot of legislators don't understand or the public doesn't understand is there are 3 domains in USIMS in the infrastructure. There's educator, which we've made significant progress, I think, in the consolidation of processes and systems, Cactus being one of them that Tim will talk to here in a few minutes. Student and financial, right? So on the scale of building an infrastructure, and I will take anyone, if Doug wants to come out here and talk efficiency, bring it, okay? We'll do it, we'll show them that, hey, look, for 7 years and for got it, if, in a lot of people's minds, it's taken too long. And the last thing that I want to clarify was this: we never said that USIMS would solve data quality issues. That has to be resolved at the point of entry. That USIMS does, it's still
Only as good as
what it do. If you can imagine, USIMS is much like our freeway system, right? It will securely move data from one place to another. Like if a student transfers from one LEA to another, we can, send those. We have the capability to do that. But then that creates the whole discussion about, well, I don't know if I want that data going in the first place, so, and that's fine. That is absolutely fine. Those are policy decisions. We've just created and are continually improving on an infrastructure that gets to what right is with the sharing of data internally to us and the LEAs, and then ultimately reporting. But that was never intended to be the silver bullet to anomalies or differences or those types of things in data quality or integrity or those types of things too. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Before we go back to, I just want to take a minute to tell the committee, and I really wish Chair Hennis was here, but he's not here to hear this. There was a request that our information items be not 15 minutes, but more like 10 minutes or less. And so, we've asked our folks, look, when you come and present, let's have here 10 minutes or less. But what I want to create in this committee is a new and different culture that if we're going to make the presentations less than 10 minutes, that we are, when we need to, we engage in a conversation. Because it's not about passive listening. And I would venture to say that what we're talking about right here, other than what we teach kids, because the standards of what we teach in classrooms is so important. I would say this is the second biggest thing that we have to focus on at USBE right now. And it's not okay for us to be just passive listeners. Like we have to engage to wrap our heads around, because we've got big decisions coming up. And the big decision coming up is where this $10 million is going to go. How far can it stretch to help our local LEAs? How much do we want to put into Aspire if we want to keep it? And then we have a whole nother piece that needs to be put in, which is what's going to happen with seats. And how much do we need to use of this to fix the seats problems that we have with the whole SOEP platform? And these are like big conversations that have to be had. And we can't just listen to the 10-minute presentations and then walk away, because there's just too much to wrap our heads around. So I hope I'm just making an apology to Katrina, because it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth when I say, well, let's keep it under 10 minutes because we've had that feedback, but then we're going to stop a bunch of times. I just want to set the culture and expectation now that within that 10-minute, it could turn into 30 minutes. If we have committee members that have to get questions answered so that they can better make decisions when the bigger decisions come up. So thank you for being patient with us.
Like I said to another deputy super earlier this week, I'm happy to talk USIMS. I could talk USIMS for hours. It's just trying to respect all of your time, so.
And the things that you say will prompt us perhaps to need to have a conversation for longer. And we need to hear from our members who might say, I need more information on this piece. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, I'm gonna skip some of these financials, just so that you know there are breakdowns. You can see examples of what we're spending and where we're spending it according to finance. So all of that information is here. We'll give it to you on a monthly basis. So with that, we'd like to jump into our student data. Mark Waddups is student data product owner. If we may, Chair, turn the time over to him for his presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and good morning, everyone, or I guess, yeah, it's still morning. This slide here, we continue to keep this slide in the slide deck so that hopefully, to piggyback off of what Chair Davis was just saying, that you have a quick glance to be able to see what's the value that we're providing in the student domain. So happy to dig into this again a little bit farther, but happy to talk offline as well. First slide is students and parents. This shows the value for educators and school administrations in the LEA. Next slide, please. The update here that personally I'm pretty excited about is the access to the student backpack. In other words, last year we built out the infrastructure to ensure that we had the flexibility with what we share with within the student backpack, but also from a security standpoint, build in the capability to be able to give access to certain data sets and not to others if the LEA chooses to take advantage of that. So one of the things that we're doing particularly is creating synthetic data for our SIS vendors to test integration while we're continuing to build out different pieces of the student backpack, and truly more in a modular way so that we're not waiting till the end of to the end of this roadmap to see the value of the functionality that we're delivering. The most exciting piece, I think, as I mentioned before, is under right now when you see manage access to student backpack, we are building what's called an API secrets manager. So what that really means is that we're giving the LEAs the ability to be able to manage their own access to those APIs in a way that the state doesn't even have access to those. So that I think is an enhanced security. As many of you know, we had one vendor that had some issues with a data breach, and part of that that from what we could see on the surface had to do with people leaving and access levels or access for those particular individuals not expiring. This solution that we're putting together will allow that, and as soon as that's in place, we have 3 different endpoints or data sets ready with real student data for our SIS vendors to start testing with, in addition to the test data. So the intention, oh, please go ahead.
As we spoke earlier, we are just getting the SIS vendors connected to this API. So you'll hear Dawn talk in just a minute about how we've already verified with multiple FIS vendors or financial vendors that they can connect and receive data from the API. So this is that same step for the SIS vendors. And as I mentioned, we've had great feedback, great cooperation from our SIS vendors. We have a couple of them who are engaged with us on a weekly and even sometimes daily basis about, hey, we're trying this and it's not working, or hey, we're doing this, could you change this? There's a lot of good feedback.
Can I ask a question here? Did this stem from the meeting that was held in the boardroom with the vendors and our board leadership and you and your team? Has this collaboration stemmed from that?
We actually were in the process of beginning this. We actually met with all of the SIS vendors that we could before that December 18th meeting that you're referring to. But the collaboration for some of the vendors, it's been just the same. They've been really great about being responsive. And so for some of the vendors, it's been better even. And we've actually included other people that meeting did identify that needed to be included in some of our meetings. So it did help, but this was already in process.
I'm gonna just be really honest. Did the threat, so to speak, of moving to one statewide system spark a heightened effort for the vendors to get to where they
They're
need to be?
responding.
It definitely sparked better responsiveness and more engagement from higher levels within the SISs. Like we had beforehand, we were having product managers and local, like state representation within the meetings, and now we're moving to VPs and those kinds of people being engaged in the meetings as well. So I wouldn't say like I'll just use Skyward as an example. They have been with us on this EdFi journey from the get-go. They were on there. We had a meeting with them years ago and they were like, we really would like to do this with you. Please let us know when you're ready. And they have been back and forth with us consistently. Their state managers have been engaged with us asking, hey, when are you going to be ready? When are you going to be ready for years now? So that has been and remained consistent. However, that SIS vendor that I said wasn't engaged with us until we talked to the state or talked to the LEA data systems. They've been the same. So it's just a matter of getting hold of them. And then they have been like, I guess I could say that it hasn't changed our interactions with them any, but I can say that they have been responsive.
So what I just heard is actually different from what I expected as you said. They've been more responsive because they want to be the one.
Maybe.
Okay.
I know that
So they're more competing to be the one rather than the threat of maybe not being the one.
Perhaps. I feel like
Yeah,
I
that's
can't,
interesting.
I haven't had that conversation with them of like what's
Yeah.
going on. So, but from our engagements, we have had some vendors who are very, very invested in conversation.
Interesting. Okay.
But some have, but one, at least Skyward was years prior to the one SAS conversation coming up at all.
Yes.
Because they just wanted to meet the need? Or is this the one you're talking about?
Yeah, Skyward, it sounded like to me, Skyward is saying, we want to be that one. No?
I think they were engaged well before that one SAS conversation even came into, I think for them, it was that they did see that there were data issues and that there were struggles with what we currently have is COPA-SIF zone, and that's a data standard that has to be translated, and there are some struggles with the data and the way that it comes into the UTREX specification, which I'm sure all of you have seen throughout time. And the UTREX team does great at solving those issues and coming up with them. But our goal to move to a different data standard is to allow for us to kind of, I call it subsuming and killing off that so that we can start anew with a new data standard that allows for more modern approaches to
Doesn't
that
need all
data.
Band-Aids all the time.
Yeah.
Which system did Grant move to?
So we're using Focus, which is a company based out of Florida.
Okay, and you feel like Focus does a better job with standards-based grading than what you were previously
Than
using?
what we had previously, but we're also working with their developers. So they have a developer team that we have direct access to. So it's very responsive right now, very helpful. Different than sometimes you get the ones that have been in the business forever and they know how the system works and they tell you how to do your business.
Okay.
So conversations are better. I'm not promoting them for a statewide.
There's a significant trend towards standards-based grading, so I mean.
Thank you. All right, sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. No, I was just to finish with that. I think that once we're able to finish that manage access to student backpack piece that you see there right now, that will unlock or allow us to be able to show that real data. We've already proof of concept, the connection. We have student test data, now synthetic data, so that we're being fast, but trying to not compromise on quality as well. And so once that piece is in place, then we'll be able to now make the real student data available for those SIS vendors to consume. And to Katrina's point, we have been in contact with each of those. We have seen, yeah, I would agree with the comments that we're seeing an increase in engagement for what I think is all the reasons that you've mentioned, as well as you know, that December 18th meeting, a heightened focus on making sure that data quality is good. Those are the highlights. We continue to progress forward on this, on the roadmap. I will start including so that you can see exactly how we're doing data set by data set, show you which ones are complete or functionally ready with real student data. And I'm happy to do that to show a little bit more visibility with that. We are still looking at adding WIDA screener scores and select SCRAM data to the student backpack based off of what our student focus working group has provided to us, but those are kind of stretch goals for us at this point. Next slide. And then again, this just kind of shows what we're working on to facilitate that transfer of information back and forth. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mark. I have a question for our board chair. So I don't think you were in yet when we were called to administrative rules for not getting the student backpack. They're like, get the student backpack up and running. So we put it on the fast track as much as possible with quality. Has our board leadership or do you intend to send an email or something to administrative rules on this? You called us here, you asked for this. This is what we have done. Here's an update to where we are in the student backpack. How do we report back to them? Like how?
That's a good question. I guess I could ask Molly as if she's been a part of that. I don't know when that took place, if that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, she was there.
Okay, so I could ask her and say, what was the request of the admin rules committee, right?
And if not, is it appropriate for this committee to make a request that our board leadership send just an update? You called us here on this day. This is what we were told. Here's a progress report.
We could, I don't know, admittedly, I don't know how admin rules works. All I know is I avoided it one time.
Oh, I can tell you how it works.
I'm sure you can. Picture, so.
Wear a thick suit jacket because you will be a whipping boy. That's how it works. But I just wonder if it would be less of that culture if each time we go up, when we have this great progress, we report back and say, here's what we've done.
Would Scott know about any kind of feedback to admin rules? Do we usually provide that, or do they just assume that we're doing what they've asked them to do?
Remember when admin rules called us about the backpack isn't up and running, we got this data in the student backpack. Do we have our board leadership or anybody go back and say, this is what we heard, here are the progress steps we've made?
Yes, so Chair, in situations where we're being questioned about what progress has been made, how much money we've spent, typically we're offered an opportunity. This is the first legislative session where we haven't had to go back, or we haven't had to go to PEA and update on USIPs, right? So that's each year, and sometimes we've done it twice, once during the session and once during the interim, right? So when questions like that come out. To Chair Hymas's question and to yours, I think too, when there are, and this is why I felt it was important to try to inform you all here about what we had been questioned on in a different committee as it related to, I believe it was McPherson's bill, Representative McPherson's bill, is to ensure that leadership or members of the finance committee, especially if there's questions on spending and all those types of things, you could do that off, offline, so to speak. We don't really get too many shots at being able to clarify or to do it, but short answer is yes. In the past, leadership has gone and talked to particular legislators about things. And my understanding is in this situation, Vice Chair Hart is going back to Senator Owens, directly to let him know about things. So yes.
So it's not just one person reports to one person of that committee.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I don't think
This is how we've done it.
required. It's
In
just how we've done
hindsight.
it. That's all I'm explaining.
In
yeah.
hindsight, it's 2020 because that's what I
Right.
did when I was in leadership too. We
Right.
would go back and just talk to individuals. But since then, I've thought there would be so much value each time we go to admin rules, especially with all this progress, to send an email back to every member on the committee, say, here's how we addressed your concern.
Yes.
Here's our
We
progress.
can do that. Yes.
I mean, I think it would be helpful. Anyway, we can move on.
Yeah, I was just describing how it's done.
Yeah.
We can do that.
And if we may turn the time over to Don Moody, our finance.
Go ahead, Don. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I think in the interest of time's sake and being succinct, if we could, just go ahead and go to the next slide on the completed and upcoming activities. So this is really where the meat of where I would like to at least spend the time with you all this morning. In particular with the Finance API, we are just about ready to give the green light to the vendors to begin their acceptance testing. The 7 vendors, they've all been well, 6 of the 7 have actively connected and sent us initial data, and most of those are ready to send us a complete set of budget and actual data for their pilot LEA. So as I said, our team is in the process of just making sure that the data on the USB side is clean, on the USIM side is clean, and then to give them the green light. And so a big activity for us over the next few months will be just kind of coordinating with those vendors to tweak any connectivity things that may come up. Like I said, when I updated this, when we initially put this presentation together, it was 2 vendors. It's now 4 that are approaching, and it kind of asking us about the timelines for that validation. So hats off to my team on kind of putting that all together. We've also working with the USB finance team around the allowing them to be able to manage the individual accounts and the revenue and expenditure and balance sheet combinations within USIMS. Within USIMS, it allows them more flexibility on how to configure different components, in particular with indirect cost. While as currently they are configured with like a set of rules, like, okay, if this is depending on if the components of the expenditures are direct or indirect, that kind of factors into kind of a formula of sorts for each expenditure. Whereas within USIMS, we will give USB Finance will have the flexibility to configure each individual expenditure as to how that will be calculated for indirect costs. So that's something that will help them out as well. So those are, like, as far as kind of a lot of the work that we're doing right now is focused on indirect costs, kind of for the rest of this fiscal year. In particular on the, we've got a lot of the components of base calculations complete. So those are when the actuals are submitted with the Finance API, we take that data and then, come up with an initial calculation for indirect cost. Now we're working on, after that, there are adjustments that need to be made as far as, okay, we need to make some adjustments as far as external contracts, which the team is, we've actually talked about some of those things with the USB Finance team. We'll be sharing that in the near future with the Focus Working Group. We've also started working on there's an unpaid leave component as well, that we actually just yesterday clarified some requirements on, to begin working on that here pretty soon. So those are, at a very high level, the things that we're working on right now. And then just kind of, with a cleanup in the adjustments space. Like I said, that's what our team will be doing here for the next few months. As far as I'm sorry, if I could just go back real quick, as far as of the 7 vendors that we've been working with, they are now all 7 of them have been responsive and active with us. A couple of them have been a little bit later to the game per se, but they've all been active and they've been it's been a positive experience overall, kind of working with them. And like I said, most of them, 3 or 4 of them are getting ready to start doing validation with us. So that's great there. So as far as kind of issues, risks, we're kind of in a green status right now. Again, we're waiting to get the feedback from the vendors and just to, kind of confirm that everything's good to go. And then just quickly here on the definition of done.
Ron?
Yes.
Never mind, you're good.
Okay. So real quick, like as far as, the finance API, we'll make any tweaks or fixes if they're identified, but that work is done. On the third part, the managing the accounts and the combinations, that has also been put in place. Again, we'll make a couple of tweaks here and there, but that is mostly done as well. And then with indirect costs, that is planned to be the team's main focus here for the next several months. Again, we've got a good idea of, okay, what we need to do. And now it's just a matter of, okay, we've been focusing on the other 2 things. Now, our roadmap is, okay, working over the next few months to get all that indirect cost piece put in place.
John, I believe Chair Davis has a question.
Yes, I do, thanks. Well, speaking of acronyms, is API Applications Program Interface or something else? It is, okay.
Yep.
Where does it going? Is done another acronym like acronyms?
I think I know the definition of done.
So what we do is we take our fiscal year and we say we are going to accomplish these things in that fiscal year. Now that does change over the year as we learn more and as we grow, but our definition of done for the year would be the things that we believe we can achieve within the year.
Chair, if I may, that stems from concerns about what progress is being made, how fast it's being made. What's the difference of where we were at a year ago compared to where we are at too? So we tailored this to answer those specific questions too. So
that's been really helpful. Thank you. I had a couple of indirect costs are really hard to.
They've been fun.
Like that's a whole nother probably conversation for another day maybe. But I'm going to ask a school fees question.
Sure.
When a person at a school level records, and I'm not talking about accrual, I'm talking about the recording, records a fee that has been paid. How quickly does that go into the LEA's finance system, and how quickly is our system able to see that?
So I can answer for our system, it's when they choose to send it. So we don't go out and say, oh, you updated something, we're just gonna take that. It's gonna be when they choose to update the information. As far as the LEAs putting it in, I don't feel like I can answer that.
Can you answer that?
I think it varies.
Yeah, I'm glad to try to explain because it depends on the systems that you have in place already. So many of us will have an accounting module or a student fee module. So it might be a third-party vendor, it might be part of our ERP systems. But there's that world. And then we also have our student information that's capturing when students enroll in a class or when they unenroll or they transfer. So we recognize or report in our SIS system, if you will, the moment the student is registered for a class. We have a transition period because they can unregister. They say, I don't want that class, I want this other class. So we kind of wait for the dust to settle, if you will, until they're like really going to go to the class. And then we have that information reported in our SIS system. In Granite's case, our SIS system regularly transfers that data to our accounting system.
What does regularly mean? Like instantaneously, once a week,
It's not instantaneously, it's once a day.
once a day?
So that information comes across, but now we're in the accounting system, so it's not student data
Right,
anymore.
right.
It's now, I have fees that were collected, I
Yeah.
have waivers that were recognized. So it's changed from a student piece of information now to just a fiscal piece of information. And that information actually gets captured in the transparency website uploads. So again, not the student data, but the fact that we had fees and we had.
And how often
waivers.
does that happen?
And that's quarterly, we're required to do that quarterly,
Required from us,
required from the state.
Okay.
Not you, the state,
finance.
state law.
That is one of those duplication efforts that the reports and requirements task force identified, is that they have to send that information to the transparency website and to us. So one of our goals is to start getting the information in the manner that the transparency website requires, so that we can help with that and either do it for them or at least get them to the place where they can just say, yeah, that's good, send it.
And that's the OSA office. Yeah.
And so that's why it's hard to answer your question directly. It's like, well, we capture it instantaneously, if you will, given that we wait for dust to settle. But then on the fiscal side, that's happening on a different basis with a different level of information.
Okay. I have another question for you about fee waivers.
Okay.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And if we may, we'll turn the time to Tim Davis, our educator product owner, for the final domain. Did you want to share the dashboards first, or do you want to do those last?
We do those last.
Okay, we have pretty shinies for you.
So hi, Tim Davis, USIM's product owner for the educator domain. So I'm just gonna jump to, you've seen these slides. I'm happy to deep dive into them, but kind of just go into like where we're at, what we're working on. And so we're in green sets, but what we've been talking about with our stakeholders and LEAs particularly is we've presented where we can have the LEA come into USIMS. It's not in production, but we're in dev and test. The LEA can come in and we can here's your educators, here's their assignments, and you can change the course codes and their percentages. And so we feel like we've got a lot of feedback from the educators about like what that is, but then like, okay, so from here, you're getting the walk-in traffic, the phone calls of your educators are coming in and they're doing what? So we want to kind of document that workflow, those high priority items. And so that's been where our conversations have been. And so that kind of segues to the dashboard that Katrina's talked about that we're going to show you in a minute. So what we've got feedback with, like, what are your like not necessarily your top 10 things, but things we can kind of high prioritize. So I have a list, and so this slide is outdated because when we prepare it, we get it ready for you. But we've done a lot of work since the slide was created. But I want to speak to that. We just met with 7 to 8 LEAs yesterday with talking about this. And so from your assignment screen, you can go to like what we call a home dashboard. On that home dashboard is basically like, so you as the LEA, you want to come in, you can see the number of educators that you still have, but then we're going to break it down. So you have this many educators with a professional license, this many educators with the associate license, this many educators with your LEA specific. Then same vein, but then number of educators who need to renew their license this year, number of educators who are expiring or their license has expired this year. And then also, I'm sorry?
Are they identified? So like a principal could
Yeah,
give
so-
a reminder to teachers, hey, you need to your license.
So twofold, it's not quite there yet, but we're working on it, is you'll get like right here, you get a screen that shows, so let's take your 1% not properly licensed. Let's say that's the number of educators. So what you get is you get that count, but then when you clicked on it, that would provide you the list of educators. So then you can call them, email them, message them, etc., and count them.
This is fake information.
Yes.
It is based on Jordan District schools, but the educator information is completely
Yes.
fake.
That's fine. I just. This is fake information.
Perfect disclaimer, yes, we have the schools are real. The data has been scrubbed, but it's a mock-up of actual educators in Jordan District, but the names have been protected to protect the NSF. And so here on the screen, we're showing, so the tabs at the top where you see assignments, employment, provision users, that is probably going to go away. That's just in our dev environment. That's kind of how we've grouped it, just to kind of, so we don't have to keep track of links. We got actual links on a page that we can go to. And so the screen you're looking at this is where we're assigned. So if we were talking, if Katrina goes back one page, so under the home page, this is where we're talking, where you would have a dashboard. And so, and this will be for all three domains. So all three domains will have their own version. So if you wear multiple hats with USIMS, so you're the HR professional for educator domain, but you're also the SIS expert at your LEA, you would, and if you do, unfortunately, you're a small charter school, so you get to do the finance stuff too. So you get to wear all three hats. So Mark and Don will have cards for you. So this, like where you see Jordan District, that is a card. That's what we call it. But then on the right-hand side, you have like announcements, notifications. So this is conversations we've had with stakeholders and LEAs, like, what do you want to see? And so that's where we came up with a list of like the number of educators you have with their licenses, but then also ties into, number of educators with certain license areas, number of educators with certain endorsements, just kind of so you got like at your fingertips, you got a glance, like your math teacher went into labor this morning, you need a math teacher right now by, first period, like you could query, you can come in here and see who's qualified to teach this class, so I can tell them other duties is assigned. And then you can worry about maybe the hiring process at a later date, but at least for that day or for that week, maybe you're temporarily covered so you can deal with that crisis. And we're still trying to figure out like what notifications you want to see, like what kind of announcements, how you want that information distributed. Do you want people, one of the conversations we had with stakeholders yesterday, they don't want to be like bombarded with, hey, you have all these notifications. Like they kind of want it. So we still have to figure out like how that's going to work in the educator domain. And we're working here. And so just to back up, give you more context. So when we were talking not properly licensed, so to use common terminology, so USB uses the term for an educator of qualified. So as an educator, you can have a license and you can be allowed to teach, but you may not necessarily be qualified for funding because of your license areas and endorsements to actually be, yes, you can teach the class because you're a teacher, but you're not necessarily qualified to teach the class to get funding for that assignment. So we, based off of, I can't remember if it's board rule or state law, but Dr. Height gave us the reference and we have it. So that's what we're referencing to. So when we say not properly licensed, what it actually means is not appropriate. It should say not appropriately licensed, but we haven't updated the text, but just, so that's what it's going to say to the educators. And then just so you guys are aware, and we would love to have you there, but we are actually going to do an in-person workshop here at USB April 29th for all of our LEAs to come. We're going to have basically this environment set up for them with scrub data so that, just because if you're not Jordan, you come in, we just want to give you the experience of, because we can't mock it up for every LEA. But what we can do is we can take mock LEAs, and so we're focusing basically on a small LEA, medium-sized LEA, and then a large LEA, and then we're going to take the data to kind of match. It's not going to be accurate, but it's scale, kind of give you a representation of that. So we're doing an in-person workshop with the LEAs. We've talked about in focus group, we're working on creating the memo that we want to give to our educator and licensing team to put in the newsletter so we can advertise it. And so you're ahead of the curve because you're here. So
what's the date of that?
It's April 29th. It's a Tuesday. It'll be Tuesday afternoon. And I believe we have the boardrooms booked for that. At least last we checked, that is subject to change, obviously, because that week is board week. And so, but last we checked with Lori, we have the room, so but it could be subject to change. So
April 29 is board week?
It's so May 1st.
May 1st.
May 1st is Thursday.
Yeah, May 1st and 2nd. So our onsite lasts all week, but we're doing the workshop in the afternoon. So time is, I'm tentatively, we're scheduling going to go from 2 to 4. The reason by 2 o'clock is because we're meeting actually with Davis in the morning. So we got to travel up to Davis, come back from Davis, depending on how long the conversation goes. I just want to make sure we have enough time to get back, and then I can set up the room because we're going to have a workstation set up where you can come in a group of you can go to workstation 1, a group of you can go to workstation 2, and you can see all of these, at least in the educator doing the work that we've done in regards to assignments and to those things. And so kind of going back to, now she's showing you kind of the dashboard. This dashboard is actually a snippet of, as an educator, you go in and you do like what we call the task checklist. Board member Davis, you're probably very familiar with this since you've done a renewal. And so this kind of takes all of those task checklist items and it puts it in a pretty dashboard for you. And this was done by our developer of Power BI expert, James Beams. So credit to him for this. We demoed this to teaching and learning on Tuesday because this is basically for them. We'll be incorporating it into USIMS and then trying to also how we can get this information to the LEAs as applicable because we are bound that we can only share certain things. For example, we can't share the exact details of the criminal background review status because of BCI's rules, and that what we can share with LEAs is just that they've cleared and if they need to contact you back. That's basically the pathways we can share for our LEAs. So that was probably a lot, but that's basically the work we were doing and we're continuing because I can't remember if I spoke to this last month. So our remote desktop service for Cactus has a security vulnerability, maybe that's not the word terminology, something, the system won't be supported come October, but with our IT staff, we are allowing our LEAs to use Cactus through the October reporting period. So nothing will be impacted, that we will be able for all their data. But we're turning on basically our LEA functionality for USIMS October 16th. So our definition of done has shifted because we've had to reprioritize the items that we identified come June last year for July 1st this year. So on our definition of done, when you look in you don't have to switch screens. You'll see items that say like reprioritized or moved because but assignments is on there. And so I just wanted to speak to that. Any questions from any of our wonderful board members?
Congratulations.
I don't see any, but thank you for the presentation. I re-up my teaching certificate every 5 years, and I was one of the guinea pigs, one of the first ones last year to do this, and it was the by far best experience I've had in all the years past.
You got me thinking about when mine expires.
Yeah, I know, exactly. It's much better now than it used to be. I don't think that thank you for your presentation. And I don't think that Rebecca is planning on speaking today. That information is just a backup.
She did last month, right?
She did last month.
Yeah,
So since we did not take a break, I am going to say meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming, except for Deputy Superintendent Jones. We have one more thing. Did we skip something?
I took this out of order in the fiscal note, but I mean, do you want to wait till next month?
It's the same slides as the study session. Just an update on the number of fiscal notes. We broke a record. So last year was 415. We're now at 438 and counting because we're still getting them right now. So just
get them till the end.
Can I just say for the public that's listening, that is an inordinate amount of work from our staff trying to help facilitate the hundreds of bills going on on the Hill for
some substitutes, things like that. Luckily, there's not 438 education bills total, but there are a substantial quantity and lots of substitutes. Once in a while, we get a bill that doesn't have a whole bunch to do with us, but they just want to make sure that it doesn't have an impact here and there. But by and large, most of them do have some sort of impact that we need to explore. And our staff agency-wide I don't think there's any section that we haven't had to reach out to with a fire drill to say, hey, read this whole bill, tell us how it impacts LEAs and the agency and the system right away. And
that is just
so it's been
an inordinate amount of work.
Great effort, and I want to shout out Nestor Rodriguez, our economist, Brett Baker from the MSP team, Del Frost as well, but our whole team has been fantastic. So
thanks to all of you. I still remember sitting in the education committee when Representative LeVar Christensen said to his committee, this state that's our neighbor had 4 education bills this year, and we have over 400. Like, what is wrong with us? What are we doing? And I think about that all the time when I hear about all these hundreds of bills. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it? Deputy Jones, we
Yeah,
good?
that's what-
I am so glad you gave us that update. Thank you. Thanks for coming, everybody.
So I do have a quick question.
Thank you.
I know before so long, it's not. Who does the ethics exam? Because I know it's not you guys.
So educator licensing, so that's been Rasmussen's group now. Does questions.
So that thing is obnoxious. And it's filled with double psychology. It's filled with, it's so verbose. How do we fix that thing? Yeah, it's terrible. I can't imagine that people don't have to retake it just because of all the double psychology.
It's fun to implement.
This is interesting.
So we have a bank of 25 questions that they provided, and we make educators do 25 of the 50. And so, but yes, it's also in the same vein.